where I play, as long as I go number one in the draft.
From the Erie Otters, Connor McDavid.
From the London Knights, Mitch Marner.
From the Western Hockey League's Brandon Wheat Kings, Nolan Patrick.
This is Tracking the Draft with Craig Button.
He checks an enormous amount of boxes. Nobody in this draft did more with less. I absolutely love him. It's not his skills that anybody's concerned about. It's that playing attitude. And quite frankly, it's really poor.
Speeding towards the future of the NHL.
From the U.S. Development Program, Jacob Truba.
From Färjestad of the Swedish Elite League, Jonas Brodin.
From the Boston U Terriers, Brady Tkachuk.
He could play in the NHL next year. He's one of those guys.
Here's your host, Dean Millard.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 31 of season 2, the second last show of Tracking the Draft with Craig Button before the National Hockey League Draft and the USHL auction draft. And the director of scouting for TSN will be along very shortly. He will join me on the show. This is where the stars of tomorrow are discovered and discussed. My name is Dean Millard. It is great to be chatting with you about the National Hockey League Draft. And we have some stud prospects to talk about today. Owen Power, ranked number 1 by just about everybody. He is a defenseman with Michigan of the Big Ten of the NCAA. Can West Scouting owns this prospect. He was originally purchased in the auction for $525, and he put up 3 goals, 13 assists in 26 games this year with the Big M. All right, we also have Zack Dean, a forward with Gatineau of the QMJHL, looks to be a centerman. Spitfire Scouting grabbed this prospect for $70, put up 10 goals and 10 helpers in 23 games this year with the Olympique. And finally, we will be chatting about Shai Buium, a defenseman with Sioux City of the USHL, previously played just like Owen Power at Shattuck St. Mary. He's heading to Denver University, prestige worldwide. This could be an absolute steal. Listed him, I believe, for $20. He goes in the first round. You're adding a few zeros to that for sure. 4 goals, 22 helpers in 50 games with Sioux City this year in the USHL. So that's the 3 players we'll be discussing today. I'm also going to ask Craig about how you judge players that haven't played this year, have missed out on that development year that other players may have. You're judging them on what they were last year, what you saw them. You can't just guess what they're going to turn out to be, but they have missed out. And I wonder if we're going to see more, I can't believe they got this guy there in the next 5 or 6 years with this draft in particular, just because some of these guys are now late bloomers because they didn't get to play this year. They didn't get that development. Scouts didn't at least get to see it anyway. So we'll chat about that and a whole lot more. Craig joins us on the UFFS hotline. Become a scout. Track the same players that Craig does. Sign up as a scout at www.uffsports.com. It's just $25 to sign up, and then you can start listing players in the 2021, 2022, or 2023 draft for just $20 if they are still available. We will be auctioning off players for the 2024 draft later this summer, and those will go in the bid. And then after the auctions, any player in the 2024 eligible draft will be available for $20. That's how easy it is. So get in the game where you own the game. And of course, this show is being broadcast proudly on Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. We have some cool things going on. We've got great shows. If you have a fantasy sports show, we would love to hear from you. Hit us up on Twitter at UFS Network, or you can email ufsn@uffsports.com. If you have a daily, monthly, weekly show, whatever it is, if it's about fantasy sports, we would love to have a chat with us. To reach out, when you can. Let us know, and we'll chat about your show. All right, let's bring him in now. He is our president of scouting for High Level Scouting. He's the vice president of scouting for Duckman's Domination, and he is the scouting director for TSN, Mr. Craig Button.
here he is. The director of scouting for TSN, former GM of the Calgary Flames, and a Stanley Cup champion with the Dallas Stars. Plus, he's a sharp-dressed man with a heart of gold and a passion to match it. Craig Button.
Craig, we are just 9 sleeps away from the NHL draft, and then shortly after that, the USHL draft. So a lot of nervous and excited GMs looking forward to that one. And how I want to start today is just a kind of general question about scouting, and how do you evaluate and judge players that didn't play this year and maybe weren't able to get that extra year of development versus players that did? So you're kind of looking, as you've stated before, you got to look at your file on that player, but they're missing that year of development. So do you factor that in, or do you just go on what the player was? I'd imagine it might be a difficult thing for scouts.
Well, here's a couple of things that I would say, more than a couple. Number one is that is a significant part of evaluation, is watching that development progression or lack thereof, or to whatever extent it happens or doesn't happen, right? But to be able to watch it over a period of time gives you a really, I think, a stronger confidence level with respect to how you're going to project that player. How you're going to, because remember, we're drafting 17 and 18-year-old players for the most part. There's lots of maturity ahead for them. And by having the 13 months, and I'm going back to March 2020, and it was 13 months essentially, for the vast, and for a lot of players, even it's still longer. They haven't had an opportunity. So to be able to watch those players as they progress from 16 to 17 into their draft year, and over the course of their draft year meet different challenges, and it becomes it not only incredibly valuable, but it really helps the confidence levels of scouting staffs to say, yeah, this is where he's at, and this is where we think he'll continue to progress to. And but in the absence, and for the players, they haven't been able to demonstrate it. The NHL teams have not been able to evaluate it. So now you're left with a vacuum. So what do you do when you're left with a vacuum? You take, previous information, and the NHL teams are going deep and wide and far to try to, cull as much information as they can on these players. You're watching them over shorter time periods, and you're saying, okay, and for an example, let's just use Dylan Guenther from the Edmonton Oil Kings. He had an opportunity to play 24 games with the Oil Kings in the Western Hockey League. He had an opportunity to go to the U18. So you could pick up from last March of 2020, jump into the WHL season, and then go to the U18 and go, okay, I got a pretty good sense of him. But how do you do that with a player like Brennan Othman? Brennan Othman, good player in the OHL. He played a handful of games in Switzerland. And then he comes over and he plays at the U18. You haven't had that chance to watch him. And I'm just giving you 2 examples. That is a really, really deep pool of players that haven't had that opportunity. And in the same breath, the NHL teams haven't had an opportunity to watch them. So what I would say is that it's a challenge unlike so many other, like any other draft year. It would be like saying, okay, we're having the draft. Here's where you're going to get to evaluate the players starting now. And you got this short period of time, and you can only go by that period of time. You go back in time to talk to people, go back to video and try to evaluate. But it is something we have never seen. And it's obviously going to be interesting to see what teams have learned about their own scouting process, what they implement going forward, to try to understand, hey, this is something that can really help us in the future, not just in a pandemic. And, obviously we're going to be able to see, what group of players, really, moves forward in their game. And we know that even under the best conditions, there's going to be players that are not going to reach the potential that NHL teams projected for them.
Well, one guy who was able to strut his stuff this year is the guy who everybody seems to have number one on their list, and he has seemed to have been there since the start of this year, and that's Owen Power, defenseman with Michigan. They play in the Big Ten, and he was originally won in an auction for $525, and then a bunch of prospects were sold to CanWest Scouting, so they've got an absolute stud on their hands. 3 goals, 13 assists in 26 games this year with Michigan. What did you think of his freshman season at Michigan this year, Craig?
Well, let me just see. His freshman season at Michigan, his tenure with the Team Canada at the World Championships, 2 years at the Chicago Steel, his midget year. There is nothing about Owen Power that is unimpressive. Nothing. So when you watch this type of a player continuously meet the challenges of the higher levels, he did that at college. I mean, he was an excellent player for Michigan. Then he goes to the World Championships, and there was nothing about the World Championships that was going to deter me or detract me from feeling that he's the best player in the draft. And let me say this. I have a line under Owen Power. I think he's the best player. I don't think there's anybody else that is better than him. I guess we can always have the conversation, but to me, he's the best. But, you think about it, Gerard Gallant didn't know anything about this player from a hands-on perspective of coaching a player, him on the bench, putting him out on the ice. Comes over there. He's heard lots about him. And what ends up happening, Dean, he ends up becoming a player that the coach says, hey, let's try him in this situation. Okay, let's try him here. Let's give him a little bit more of this. Let's try him in this situation. Let's give him a little bit more of that. He didn't become a regular defenseman for Team Canada en route to the gold medal at the World Championships. He became an integral member of the blue line. He was a top 4 defenseman that was asked to do significant amounts of work and contribute in really, really critical areas. And he did. Now, you're trying to project players to the NHL. And as they move up the ranks, you're trying to evaluate them as they meet the challenges that are a little bit closer to the NHL. Now, I have no idea, okay, with respect to other players that haven't, had that opportunity. And the World Championships isn't the NHL, but it's closer to the NHL than college. And college is closer than junior, in my view. So now you have this group, you have this player that is continuously showing that he can master the next level. And based on what I've seen, and I've watched him since he was a midget player in Toronto, and we talk about scouting and everything. Like, one of the benefits of watching Owen Power is there was no gap. There was really, other than, perhaps not participating at the World Junior Camp, the World Junior Tournament, last summer, maybe not coming to the World Junior Camp. Other than that, he's had everything you would want to be able to feel confident about evaluating his game in terms of playing time and playing opportunity. He has it. And, he's number 1 defenseman, and that's what I project him at, have to be able to contribute in every significant area of the game. And they have to be able to control those situations and do it in a manner that is defensive, offensive, skating, physical, using your size, closing the gap, all those things. I can't find any flaws in Owen Power's game.
That's terrific to hear. And, the Buffalo Sabres will be very happy unless, Seattle swoops in and makes a big deal. But, we talk about, NHL draft versus fantasy draft. And, we talk a lot about the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. And sometimes those defensemen that go first overall in the NHL, they might not be the biggest fantasy contributor, but it sounds like Owen Power is going to be able to contribute offensively, which is, would make a team in the UFHL go after him because of those weighted offensive categories. And you and I have talked about what makes an offense or number 1 defenseman. Can you just touch a little bit on his offensive game and where you think that might be able to grow as he continues to develop?
I don't think he'll have gaudy offensive numbers in the National Hockey League, a la Erik Karlsson, okay, who's a brilliant offensive player, right? Like, I don't think he's going to have that type of offensive stat line. But like you watch a player that moves the puck, and where I really evaluate defensemen is in the offensive zone with respect to being able to create offense and generate points. He himself moves around the offensive zone with incredible ease and with a real understanding of how he can be dangerous. He understands where to move the puck and who to get it to in the offensive zone that creates scoring opportunities and, by extension, will get points on the board. And, when you watch all those elements work together and understand that, okay, Erik Karlsson's a special defenseman offensively. I mean, those guys are rare. I mean, he's a rare player. But when I watch Owen Power play and I watch his abilities offensively, I see a player that is going to contribute and be a real strong contributor. And, Victor Hedman, who I think is the best defenseman in the National Hockey League, go and look what he did early on in his career. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a big point producer. He was in the 30 range, like knocking on 40, and then he just explodes. And, do I think Owen Power has that potential? Yes. Do I think it's as great as Hedman with respect to, where he finds himself now offensively? No, I don't think it's as great, but don't rule it out because we're talking about a brilliant mind for the game in all the areas of the game. And I've seen lots of skaters that can move the puck up to the blue line and they get in the offensive zone. They cannot do what's critically important to creating offense inside the offensive blue line. That's opening up the lanes. That's making plays under sticks and through skates. That's recognizing who and where to get the puck and to get it there at the right times, as well as getting yourself involved in the attack. Owen Power does that.
It's pretty comical to think there were people concerned about Victor Hedman early in his career and whether he was going to live up to it. I mean, geez Louise. So having said that, it's good to be patient, especially with young players, defensemen, goaltender in particular. Sometimes take longer. Sometimes they jump right in. But what is your favorite part of his? He has so many great qualities. What's your favorite part? And who do you see Owen Power when you watch him? Is there a comparable that you like?
Well, when I first watched Owen, I saw a lot of Chris Pronger. He was long. He was lanky. I mean, and let's just remove Chris Pronger from that edge that he had because very few players had the edge that Chris Pronger had.
Right.
I'm talking about the length. He was thin, but his mind was brilliant. His ability to just move the puck at the right time, precision passer, understanding that okay, here's where I got to be to close down this play, reading, anticipating. And that was with the puck, without the puck. So that was the player when I very first saw Owen Power play that he reminded me of. Now, I know what Chris Pronger connotes with respect to the edge that he played with, and he did it as well as any defenseman that's ever played at that level. But, Owen's ability to, mentally, be in the game and be steps ahead of everybody else. That's what Chris Pronger did. That's how Chris Pronger played the game. I heard this comment about Chris Pronger during his draft year. He could play the game in a rocking chair. Mm-hmm. The reason he can play the game in a rocking chair is because you're relaxed, you're calm, you're poised, you're settled. That's Owen Power.
Awesome. I love all of that. All right, let's get to Zack Dean, a forward with Gatineau of the QMJHL Spitfire Scouting Agency, snagged this player in the original Futures Auction Draft for $70, and that could pay off quite handsomely. 10 goals, 10 assists in 23 games in the Q. It's interesting. He was, I read he was born in Alberta, grew up in Newfoundland, played some hockey in Toronto before joining Gatineau. He's kind of like the I've Been Everywhere Man song, but wherever he's been a reliable player for a coach to have. That's what I gleaned from some of the comments I read. What do you think about that?
Well, well, I think that Zack Dean, and you go back and you pull out, the evaluations of watching him, and then you watch him this year in a different way, and you understand what he does, and he's a player that to me does so many things well in the game. He does it in a understated fashion, but not in any way less meaningful fashion. He's on the puck. He understands where to go, where to be. He's quick, to recognize where he can take advantage, both offensively and defensively. He's a really strong competitor. Like he's in it to win it. That's how I feel about Zack. And when you watch him play the game, I always come back to this. Is that a player I'd want on my team if I'm interested? I mean, everybody's interested in winning, so it might be a silly comment to make. But you're always looking for players that can make a difference to winning. Mm-hmm. And when I watch Zack Dean, I see a difference maker. He may not be going offensively one night, but he's going to find a different way to make a difference to helping you win that night. And in another game, he may say, like, I got to find a way to create more scoring chances here for our team to win. And that recognition of what he has to do, and then dialing into it. Dean, how many times do we see players that if they don't get their so-called game in the game, they become non-factors.
Invisible.
Zack Dean, to me, never becomes a non-factor. And when watching him play and watching him compete and the way he goes about playing the game, there's no area of the game where he's not really dialed into it. And I think players like him are ones that end up being really valuable to teams. Coaches love to have him out on the ice because you know exactly what you're getting, and it's real good quality. Is it elite quality? No. If he was, we'd be talking about a player at the top end of the draft. But I think he's got a chance to be a really strong two-way centerman.
He says he likes to model his game after Matthew Barzal. Do you see that, or do you see another player as far as comparable? And keep in mind, we know, Craig, that when he says Matthew Barzal, he knows it's a style. Or when we talk about Chris Pronger, we're not saying this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. But do you see similarities between the guy he likes to model his game after?
Hey, what I would say is I have no problem with players that want to model your game. I don't see Matt Barzal in Zack Dean's game. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with him modeling his game after that type of player. I don't see anything wrong with that in any way, shape, or form, right? But I see a really strong two-way centerman. I see somebody that can play. Matt has this fantastic skill set, handling the puck and skating, right? And very few players have what Matt Barzal has. Mm-hmm. But, when Joel Eriksson Ek is getting a lot of play now for being such a good, he was a real top vote getter for Selke Trophy, just signs a long-term contract with the Minnesota Wild. That's who I see Zack Dean like.
Okay, so we've talked about different terms that people use, best player available or draft for need versus whatever it is. So I'm going to throw two terms at you that sometimes get used in a draft. Okay, so is he the, quote, safe pick as opposed to the, quote, boom bust pick? And I'm not sure how you feel about those terms being used on players, but there is a lot of those being thrown around. And people, sometimes they like to look and be like, oh, he's a defensive player. He's that safe player. Well, there's no guarantee that that guy is going to turn into that defensive player. He might play a safer game, but what do you think about those terms?
Well, yeah, terms and a lot of terms get used, interchangeably, and sometimes you can understand what they mean, and sometimes you just try to, go a little bit deeper into what they mean. So I just described Zack Dean, okay? Mm-hmm. And does that sound like a safe player?
Well, it sounds like a player you can trust. I would use that word more than like I think okay. I could trust.
But I'm just saying,
him.
but based on my description, does that sound like a safe player?
Yeah, I think that's a guy who's you're safe to throw over the boards every time. That's what I think of when I think of safe. Yeah.
Okay, so fair enough. So that's what I mean about digging a little bit deeper on the definition, right? So if we agree what safe means, then we can use the term. If safe means, well, he might not have a lot of upside, but we know what he's going to be, and the downside isn't that much, right? Well, I don't use it that way. If you're going to start going into a draft, you're looking in a draft for players. I just talked about Zach. Who can make a difference to my team in terms of outcome, winning and losing? Who can do that? That's who I want to know. And I think Zack Dean's a difference maker. And so when I watch him play, do I think that he could score more? Perhaps he can. I just said I don't see him as Matt Barzal. In fact, I don't see him like Matt Barzal in any way, shape, or form. Just to be clear on that, okay? And there's nothing wrong with modeling your game and saying I might want to be more like that.
Sure.
But I don't. So if somebody thinks that he's boom because he can be like Matt Barzal, I would say totally disagree. Now, what does bust mean? What's a bust? Like, Dean, I've seen 60 goal scorers not make it in the NHL.
Yeah.
I've seen guys that were dominant goaltenders, defensemen, forwards that were drafted high that didn't make it. So would you say that's a bust player? No. It tells you that how hard it is to translate into your game into the National Hockey League. You've heard me say this continuously, and I'll be able to continuously say it. The NHL teams are drafting the players that have been the best at the levels below them. Mm-hmm. They draft 60 goal scorers that don't turn out. They draft goaltenders that were dominant that don't turn out. They draft defensemen that dominate that don't turn out. So are we going to say that, like, could I just, I'm not going to pick a name. I'm just going to say, so you draft a 60 goal scorer. Are we sitting here saying he's a bust when he goes in the top 10? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. There's the development side too.
Right. So I think you have to be really realistic when you use the term boom or bust. Because if you're saying he's boom and can be like Matt Barzal, I totally disagree. Mm-hmm. That's not boom. That's unrealistic. I'd like to hear somebody tell me, because we see it time and time again, and I'll share this with you. I've said this about the draft, and I'm one for potential, and I look at potential, and I recognize based on the history and on the numbers and everything that's happened, that there's going to be players that are drafted in the top 10 that don't make it, and in the first round that aren't going to make it. That just, we know that. And I said a couple of years ago, I said, wouldn't it be interesting if I picked the 6 to 8 players that I think aren't going to make it? But that's not fair to the players. That's not fair. And that's not what I'm about, right? But I can tell you this right now. I want to hear somebody tell me that the guy that was picked third is going to be a bust. Tell me that.
Yeah. Well,
don't use boom or bust to talk about a player that's, considered maybe in the middle part of the draft or the middle part of the first round or later in the first round. Mm-hmm. Sorry, not buying. Tell me that Nail Yakupov's going to be a bust. Right. Tell me. Don't tell me that Zack Dean could be boom or bust. Tell me that you think Nail Yakupov could be bust, because everybody thought he'd be boom.
You look at situations where, yes, players are drafted in the first round, and Nail Yakupov, a prime example. And then there's players drafted in the 8th round, like Pekka Rinne, who just retired, who go on to have a great career. So, are you looking when you're drafting in the 8th round at having a starting goaltender for 15 years? You might like it to happen, but you're probably looking at the guy you're drafting in the first round that might be doing that. So it's all over the place with the, and we've talked about expectations in a draft a lot, Craig. And a lot of times the expectations are out of whack when you look at the player that is drafted by fan base or GMs and coaches and a lot of things. So it's there's a lot, when you use boom or bust, there's a lot of leeway that you're giving with that. But, every scout, and we've talked about it as well. Every scout has their own board and the off the board comments, things like that you'll hear. But anyway, Craig joins us.
But let me add something. I want to add something because I want to keep it in my mind. Is that, expectations, like teams, I believe that you have to project players along a sliding scale. Do you think, what's the best outcome?
Right.
What is an outcome? And then, so you watch a guy, I may have used this example with you before, and Jim Nill, the general manager of the Dallas Stars, long time with the, I asked him about Darren Helm. Darren Helm was a middle round draft pick, I think 4th round, if I recall correctly. Anyway, he was drafted, a real great skater. All of a sudden, he gets into his second and third after his draft year, and he starts putting up points. And you start saying, and then Darren Helm now starts. He was part of a Stanley Cup team before he was part of a regular season team in Detroit, and then he went back to the minors because he had this element. I asked Jim Nill this question. I said, when you were evaluating Darren Helm, and you see the great skating, you see him start to move forward and point. Did you think he could be a significant point producer when you were doing the evaluation, not just at the draft, but as you continued on? He said, Craig, no. He said, when we drafted him and when we watched him, we really thought that he had that disruptive speed that could be Chris Draper-like. It was going to be different than Chris Draper because Chris was so physical and hard on you. But he said, but we looked at it and thought, we really felt strongly that if he continued to develop 80%, 90%, he could be Chris Draper. The offense came, but we only put maybe 10 to 20% on him being a really top end, not a top end, but a really good offensive player. That's realistic expectations. That's realistic projections.
Indeed. All right, so Craig joins us courtesy of the UFFS hotline, and scouting is so massive in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. Free agents, prospects, they go through a scout, so you can get in the game where you own the game, as these will be digital athlete NFTs, and you can put your scouting talent to good use. Real-world scouting. You're going to watch real-world players or watch them online, wherever you do, and scout for fantasy hockey franchises. You can become an independent scout. You can form a partnership with an existing franchise. Check out uffsports.com. Register as a scout today, and you can start listing players, if they're still available, for as little as $20. So the final player we're going to chat about today is Shai Buium, a defenseman with Sioux City of the USHL, formerly of Shattuck St. Mary, grew up in San Diego, so a guy that clearly has benefited from the growth of the game down south. And Prestige Worldwide picked up this prospect in the original scout auction for just $20, so this could be really, really interesting for them. 4 goals, 22 assists in 50 games this year in the USHL. What is it about him that you have really liked lately that you've moved him up as you did your final rankings?
Well, again, you're trying to gather more information on players that have potential. You know that they're being watched very closely. And again, so he had an opportunity to end up in the USHL and really demonstrate those qualities. And so what are we looking at here? And I'll be straightforward with you. It's funny. I talk about the list, right? I talk about so I did 75, right? And I'm looking at the list, and I'm looking at it all the time and every day, and I go, yeah, he should be higher. Yeah, he should be higher, right? And I do, because you start to look at the potential and you start to look at what he possesses. So, from an athletic point of view, hockey athleticism and everything, he's got this fantastic hockey athleticism. Skates, he's free, he's easy, with respect to the way he moves around the ice. He does it almost effortlessly with respect to, moving laterally, the pivoting, backwards, forwards, quickness, speed, just all those elements that are so critical to being able to impact the game in more ways than one. He's good with the puck. And one of the things I really like about Shai is that when he has the puck, he's looking to make a play. He's not looking to survive a situation. He's not looking to be in a spot where, oh, now what? He's looking to make a play. And there's going to be times when the play doesn't occur. There's going to be times when you're waiting for the play to develop and you realize, okay, wait a second, I got to cut my losses right here. That's part of development as a defenseman. And the key word there is development. I see only areas of development in his game that need fine-tuning. I don't see inherent flaws in his game. I don't see a player that uses that skating, moves up the ice, moves to a spot, and then all of a sudden, now what? Now what? right? I see so many defensemen that can skate, and then they get moving, and then now what? Oh, whoops! Oh, that play wasn't there. So when I look at him and see that this development, and I see an ability to, like, he's engaged. He's not just engaged on the offensive side of the game. He's engaged on the defensive side of the game. He's engaged without the puck. He wants to stop the play on his terms. He doesn't want to stop the play where he's defending back and now he's got to try to figure out, okay, I better close it here. He's always in a spot, in my view, where he is looking to stop the play where he can take advantage. And he can now transition from a defensive player to an offensive player. And you put the physical size, you put the athleticism, and now you put the brain and the thinking, the way he approaches the game. I think there's a lot there. I think there's a lot of potential there. And keep in mind, he's a player that as he's moved up the ranks, we talked about Owen Power, Shattuck St. Mary's, then he goes to Sioux City. There is lots to like there. And quite frankly, I think he's going a lot earlier than 32.
And he's going to Denver, which is a school that has always been high on development. And when I watched him on video, the one thing I really came away impressed with is how calm he is under pressure, the good decisions that he makes. He doesn't seem, he's going back to get the puck. There's a guy on him. He calmly makes a pivot or makes a quick little pass to get out of danger. Like you talked about Chris Pronger playing in a rocking chair a little bit. I saw a little, and small sample size, I just saw a very calm under pressure player, even on the blue line, walk in the line with a guy on him, doesn't rush it and throw it, give it away so a breakaway that goes the other way. I just thought really good decision making from him.
Well, and so when I just talked about he's always looking to make a play, right? So, I call what he does and players, I use this term. I call it POT, progression of thought. When you're playing in the National Hockey League, and this is where you're projecting the players, you need to be able to process the game quickly, rapidly, and under duress. It would be nice if there was no duress or any pressure. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. And again, you see players, Dean. I see lots of players. I'll just use defensemen. They go back for a puck and they're quick to get to the puck, and it's like, oh my God, I got to get to the puck. And when I use that term, now what? It's like, okay, now I got to the puck. Now what? That guy's right on me. Now what do I do? And you just described, Shai, how I see that. He's going back for the puck. He's the one in control. He's the guy that has things managed. And the forechecker may think they got him in a tough spot. He knows exactly where he's at. He knows what he wants to do, and he knows how to take advantage of that forechecker. Same thing on the offensive blue line when you talk about walking the line. He doesn't feel rushed. John Wooden, the great UCLA basketball coach, had a saying, be quick, but don't be in a hurry. Mm-hmm. Buium is quick, but he's not in a hurry because he's looking to make plays.
Yeah, make a good decision and make that decision fast, but then don't rush what that kind of decision is, right? You got to make the decision fast, but then you got to have the cognitive thoughts or the cognitive brain power to be, okay, that's the decision I make, but if I make that pass right now, it's going to get picked off. If I wait a second or whatever it might be, you have to make you have to have fast decision making, but then have the calmness to show it through.
Yeah, well, and that's the key. I know when, being part of NHL teams, when you're doing pre-scouts for the playoffs, and, we went to the Stanley Cup finals in Dallas and in Minnesota, but, you're always looking for those players that you can pressure that will make a mistake, that you can put into a tough spot where you can take advantage of the next play, right? You're always looking, and that's from a pre-scouting game point of view, right? And the ones talking about Chris Pronger, and I'll go back to Chris Pronger in a second because it follows here. But Shai Buium, I don't see that. I don't see a player you're watching and going, okay, you better play him straight up. You could look at Scott Niedermayer and go, oh, look at him, we're going to get to him physically. Yeah, good luck. Got no chance. Got no chance, right? You might think you have a chance, and you might look at it that way. You don't. I remember we were up against the St. Louis Blues in Dallas, and we were playing against Pronger and McInnes. Now, Chris was different than Al. But I remember at one point, Ken Hitchcock says, we got to get after Chris Pronger. We got to deliver blows on Chris Pronger. We got to make him feel the hurt. And Rick Wilson just looked at Ken Hitchcock. He goes, just tell us how we're going to do that. He goes, first of all, like Chris Pronger knows what's coming before the guy trying to deliver it knows what he's going to do. So just tell me how we're going to do it. He goes, we can do it on a face-off. We can do it when there's no play going on. He goes, but when the play's going on, he goes, I don't know how you're going to get to Chris Pronger. And, I think that's, and obviously we talk about a Hall of Fame defenseman that was so advanced in his game. But Shai Buium, he's got progression of thought.
Yeah, it's like trying to run Larry Robinson out of the game, right? It just wasn't happening. Right. The Oilers in the 80s weren't doing it. Yeah.
Brian Leach, I get it. Like, you want to think that that's your game plan? That, good luck. Like, you would have a better chance, honestly. You'd have, like, if you think you're running Scott Niedermayer or Brian Leach out of a game, you have a better chance of wrestling a bear than you do of running those guys out of a game.
Well, I was going to say, you'd have a better chance of getting on a bull at the Stampede that you're going to go to and riding it for 8 seconds than you might of getting Chris Pronger out of a game at some point with intimidation.
Well, I'll tell you what, okay? My attempt to ride the bull would be the same as my attempt to try to intimidate Chris Pronger. I would clearly end up injured. Exactly. I would clearly end up injured.
Exactly. All right, so next week, final show before the draft, I'm going to take 32 players from your list of 75. We're going to do rapid fire 1 through 32 players. Might not be the top 32. It's just going to be 32 players, and we'll discuss them for about a minute each. You up for that?
Totally up for it. That'll be fun, and gives some different perspective on players that might be outside my 32, but very well could end up being first round draft picks. So that's a fun idea, Dean. I'm in.
Excellent. All right, we will chat next week. Good luck riding that bull this weekend and enjoy it.
Listen, there will be no videos anywhere of Craig riding up, not a real bull, not a mechanical bull. Listen, I know what I am incapable of, so I'm not going to go there.
Really quick story. 2001 Memorial Cup. I'm covering the Red Deer Rebels in Regina. There's a bar there called The Pump that had a mechanical bull. I had to ride it the first night I got in there, so I did. James Shawaga, longtime Brandon Sun reporter, shows up and bets me 2 days later that I couldn't ride the bull and he'd buy me drinks all night. I didn't tell him I rode the bull before. I didn't have to last 8 seconds. I just had to get on there, and I drank for free that night, Craig. So maybe you do want to jump on a mechanical bull every once in a while.
No, they have the mechanical bull set up at the Stampede.
Yeah,
and I've seen many try. I've seen many try, Dean. What I would do is I would just take off my cowboy hat and tip it to you and with great respect. Listen, we talked about upside and downside, boom or bust. There is only bust for Craig Button riding a mechanical bull or a real bull.
Right. Well, keep in mind, this was 20 years ago for me, so 45-year-old Dean is not getting on a mechanical bull either. But enjoy it, Craig, and we'll talk next week.
Thanks, Dean.
This is a serious message.
Craig Button joins us on the Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports Hotline. Become a scout and make money while providing prospects to the Ultimate Franchise Hockey League.
What you talking about, mister?
Pay that man his money. I'm your huckleberry.
Check out the details at www.uffsports.com.
It's serious. I like it a lot. I said we got to win it.
UFFS. You own the game.
And the draft with Mr. Craig Button each and every week. And in the next little while, probably a couple of weeks after the draft next week, we will do Craig's Counsel, where we'll do story time. He can give you some scouting tips if you have questions. The week after the draft, we'll recap it, and then our final show of the season will be story time and scouting tips. So if you have a question for Craig that you'd like to ask him, whether it's about a player, or specific to scouting, or a story from his very storied NHL management career, hit us up, trackingthedraft@gmail.com. Email it, and we will add it to the list of topics that we have already for Craig's counsel. Okay, a couple of things to tell you. We have a massive weekend. First of all, if you did enjoy it, please subscribe. Click that bell right on UFSN or wherever you're listening from. Thank you very much for that. And you will get the new shows every week, every Wednesday when they come out. We've got some huge stuff going on this weekend. If you go to uffsports.com, you can register for the UFAFL franchise auctions this weekend. It starts on Friday, ends on Sunday. VIP events in Vegas. You can still get there. Cheap flights, have a ball, buy a franchise, and you are in the mix for the greatest fantasy sports platform of all time. So check that out. Please check that out and have a lot of fun with the UFAFL franchise auctions in Vegas this Sunday. VIP events will be happening. You will not want to miss this once and only franchise auction opportunity for the UFAFL rather. You will be able to buy a franchise later, but get in the mix now if you can. Great shows on Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. We've got the UFFS podcast every Sunday with Darren Bates and Larry Fisher. 2 Minute Tuesday with Darren Bates. This show with Craig Button comes out every Wednesday. Full Count Fantasy Baseball will be live Thursday morning at noon Eastern every Thursday with myself and Jordan Blundell. Larry Fisher and I have UFHL Now on Friday. He's the UFHL Insider, and the Ultimate Roundtable once a month every Saturday. We got a new one coming out this Saturday, so you'll want to check out and keep it locked on UFSN to find out all the great details about the Ultimate Roundtable. That will be happening on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. Okay, that means it is time to wrap things up on the show. As mentioned, if you have a question, if you'd like to join the show as an advertiser or a partner, please email me, trackingthedraft@gmail.com. Thank you so much to Craig Button, the Director of Scouting for TSN, also the President of Scouting for High Level Scouting in the UFHL, and the Vice President of Scouting for Duckman's Domination in the UFHL. Thank you to Craig for his passion, his time, his knowledge. I can't wait to do the 1-minute rapid fire questions next week on our final show before the draft. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Keep going, Scouts, in the UFHL. Lots of great players still out there. Have yourself a wonderful week. We'll talk to you next week before the draft. See you later.